Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello, welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted with Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray, the show in which two friends watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer this simple question. Is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? This week, I'm joined, as ever, by Oscar. How are you doing, Oscar?
I'm all good, yeah. It is strange whenever we do this podcast, we video chat each other, and Diggory is always sitting in the dark, like it's sort of hell or something. I don't know why it is. It could be like midnight, or it could be 10 in the morning, who knows?
It's because now that I can, because I have to stay inside all day, I live in a perpetual state of darkness. So why not? Why not? Today we're talking about Maurice. So why don't we have a cheeky little synopsis and we get right into this film.
Maurice, directed by James Ivory and released in 1987. In 1909, Maurice Hall, played by James Wilby, attends Cambridge University, where he befriends Clive Durham, played by Hugh Grant. The two embark on an intense but paranoid affair. Homosexuality is illegal in British Edwardian society, so the two men must now decide to reject their true sexual identities or risk plunging their families into disgrace and themselves into prison.
One thing I wanted to get into before we talk about Hugh Grant's role in the film is the fact that this is a big film in terms of Hugh's career, because it was his first big break. It was at the time he was doing radio commercials and hadn't heard from his agent in months. And his agent rang up and said, they want to see you for this film, Maurice. And he thought, I couldn't be bothered. And he was living with his bossy banker brother at the time, who was like, Hugh, for God's sake, go. And thank God he did. And the film did quite well. At the Venice Film Festival, there was a big round of applause at the end when they showed this film for the first time.
And then the tradition at Venice is that we, the filmmakers, stand up to accept the applause. What I had forgotten is that my suit was much too tight, and I'd undone it, and I'd undone my trousers quite early in the film, and I completely forgot to do them up. So it did look odd that at the end of this gay film, I stand up and bow solemnly to everyone, next to my co-star with my trousers undone. And
also at the Venice Film Festival, I thought this was great as well. The director, I think James Ivory, said to him, Hugh, you've got quite a nice room. They've paid for quite a nice room for you. Do you mind if I use it for a couple of hours just because I'm, to have a nap in the afternoon? And Hugh's like, of course, go ahead. We know Hugh's a lovely man. And James Ivory went up to his room.
And he came down 2 hours later, absolutely ashen-faced. And I said, Jim, what's the matter? What's the matter? And it turned out he'd had his nap, got up, and thought he's got to clean his teeth. So he went to the bathroom to borrow my toothbrush and toothpaste. But he got the toothpaste mixed up with a hemorrhoid cream. Is
this true?
Yeah. And he was traumatised. And when I got back to the room, there were all these little towels that were mouth-shaped, where he crammed them into his mouth. Get the cream out. Did I go too far with that?
Which is...
Hugh just comes up with... He's got some great stories from down the years.
Honestly, he does.
He's always he's the most anecdotal interview you ever have. That's why I want to get him on the pod, because he just goes off on tangents about these bizarre stories you can't really think existed. But
I mean, Hugh's just, everything he says, he gets the point across, but it's also just so funny.
He's got the whole crowd around his little finger.
Look out the window. Look out the window. Look out the window. It's Hugh Grant in a Pret. Speaking of Hugh Grant, as we so often are on this podcast, Oscar, I have to ask you, as I always do, what did you think about Hugh Grant in this film, and specifically the first time you saw him in this film?
For all Hugh Grant fans out here, this is the first time we really see Hugh at his absolute prime. This is Hugh Grant's curtains hair on fleek. This is the nice little rounded face with the nice cheekbones on absolute point. And all fans out there, and I know this because we trawl Twitter almost daily, they love this film for his look. This is like when people tweet falling in love with Hugh Grant in 1980, this is the one they tweet out.
You're exactly right. This may be the best Hugh ever has looked. The curtain hair is perfect. He has a chiseled face. He's also wearing a lot of quite smart clothes that are so sharp, and they really complement his facial structure.
They do.
I mean, these pictures of him are a thirst trap. For those of you that know what that means, he's a thirst trap. It's an absolute, like, he's often compared to the Timothy Chalamet of today. That's what this character is in this film. Like, if you think Hugh Grant's a good-looking chap, just watch the first half of this film. He is on another level, and especially that first scene when the lead Maurice goes into his room to meet him, and he sat on the floor surrounded by all these different recordings of
Tchaikovsky, I believe,
and he looks up at the door to see the guy come in, and you look down, and you're just like, Hugh's just sat there, and you just think, oh my god,
it's the perfect man.
Come in. Hello. You're Durham, aren't you?
Yes.
I was looking for Risley. Don't know where he is.
He's debating at the Union. I was just stealing his pathetic symphony. I'm reading a paper on Tchaikovsky, but I cannot find the third movement. If it's here at all, which I don't think it is.
I'm writing a paper on Tchaikovsky and can't find the third movement. I mean, it's that kind of film. Everyone's really poncy and
it is a bit of an eye roll. But this is what you expect from Hugh early on in his career. Having said that, though, Diggs, if we're talking about Hugh's look, you halfway through the film, he develops something on his upper lip, which I'm not a huge fan of.
He gets a moustache, and let me tell you, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. It's so bad, and I think that's because the way this film goes is Maurice and Hugh Grant's characters at first are, in love, and eventually though Hugh denounces that side of things and gets married to a woman. And I think that part of having the moustache, when someone has a beard, when a gay man has a beard, and it's like a buffer girlfriend or partner, whatever. I think that's what the moustache is, and I think it's not meant to look good.
It's like his mask.
Exactly. But regardless of whether it's a mask or not, it looks like shit.
Are you a business owner? Are you running a political campaign? Are you a furniture outlet having yet another sale? If the answer to any of those questions isn't no, then you can have your advertisement right here. The Taking Hugh for Granted podcast gets over 100 listeners every single episode. For prices starting as low as 6 figures, you can have your advertisement right here. So what are you waiting for? Email takinghughforgranted@gmail.com today for a full price list, and you can have your advertisement right here.
Diggs, maybe we should get right into the film, and we wanted to talk about the very beginning, which is one of the stranger beginnings to any Hugh Grant film we watch. I mean, we've watched music and lyrics, and that's pretty weird, but this one is just downright almost disturbing. You're kind of like, where is the film going?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so you have all these school children walking on the beaches, maybe on a school trip, and the main teacher takes Maurice to one side and goes, "You don't have a dad, do you? And you don't have any father figures." And Maurice is like, "No, sir." And he's like, "Right then, well, and he gives him the talk of the birds and the bees talk.
That thing. There. Now, that will develop and grow larger. You see? And when that happens, the man lies very, very close to his wife, and he puts his membrum virilis into her Vagina.
Wagina.
Yeah, and it is completely bizarre, and it's no more shown than when they walk off. Another family come along with this little girl, and they look at the drawings in the sand. These graphic drawings of literally, labor majora and the clitoris and all this sorts of stuff. And this little girl's like, and her parents like shield her eyes.
Do you know where we've seen that character before, though? The guy who plays that person.
Talk to me, baby.
Maybe you didn't notice, but it's the actor is Simon Callow, and he plays Gareth in Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Four Weddings and a Funeral, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he certainly does.
And I hadn't picked up on that the first time I watched this film, but on the second watching, I was like, another moment of the universe.
Another universe link. Oh, mate, it's getting unbelievable now. The connections on my wall are actually getting too much to bear. If it wasn't pitch black in here, I'd be able to see that. But unfortunately, it is. I do love that scene. But to be fair, from the very offset, there's no thought that Maurice isn't going to be with a woman and be married. He even says, he's like,
one day when you fall in love,
you're going to lie with a woman. And even Maurice as a kid goes, I don't want a wife. And he's like, in 10 years, I invite you and your wife to dine with me and mine. And it's like, the whole birds and the bees talk is very heteronormative. So it does provide
serves a purpose for the rest of the film, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think you're right, Oscar.
In classic romantic film fashion, Hugh and Maurice now... I keep calling him Hugh. His name is Clive Durham, but I'm obviously going to call him Hugh. Hugh and Maurice are at university together. Are they in Cambridge?
They're in Cambridge, yes, and it's very stuffy. And it's everything you could imagine Cambridge to be like in 1909, and in probably 2022. But that's a side note.
Yeah.
But anyway, Hugh and Maurice fall in love, basically. And it seems to be a sort of mutual thing, but obviously they're not. This is obviously very against the law at the time.
It's interesting because it seems to skip from term to term. 1 minute will be in the winter term, then the summer term. So there's a few. You get little glimpses of it. There's a moment where Maurice rolls Hugh up in a carpet like he's a fucking burrito, and he's on top of him. And you think, are they going to kiss here? But it doesn't really quite happen. And then
there is this wonderful moment that we wanted to talk about. That is often is kind of, I guess, if there's a sizzle reel of the film, this is the point where everyone looks at.
Maurice is sat there on this very, very loud wicker chair. Hugh Grant referred to it in that interview that I was talking about before at the LGBTQ plus film festival. He referred to it as the loud chair scene, and apparently his friends always take the piss out of him and do impressions of the chair. But anyway, so Maurice is sat on this chair, and Hugh's sat on the floor resting his head against his leg, and Maurice is stroking his hair, and this is like you say, it's emblematic of the film.
And Clive slightly raises himself up from the chair, and they're just about to kiss for the first time. And then just at that moment, a bunch of their friends from the college come through the door, banging through the door, and want to take Maurice off to a game.
That was director James Ivory there talking a little bit more on the scene. But yeah, so many people online will use this GIF.
Well, I mean, it's become a sort of cult GIF of, I mean, maybe this is a bit far, but it's become a serious icon of LGBTQ plus film. Yeah. And a sort of GIF online of one of the first films where, openly gay men on screen, kissing, holding hands, being in a happy relationship, or, in some cases not happy, but there's a happy ending to the story. So it's a poignant point in the film, because that's the first time you sort of realise that there is a connection between the two characters.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted, the podcast show.
Let's then talk about Maurice. So, as we say, we've had the turmoil. Maurice and Hugh Grant were getting together. Everything seemed beautiful. It seemed like your classic romantic story. Hugh Grant drops this bombshell that things with men should be platonic only. I'm going to go and pursue women. And he does eventually get married. This sends Morris into a bit of a spiral. And he goes in search of some remedies for his homosexuality. So he goes to see his doctor.
And the doctor just sort of tells him, like, oh, John, he inspects his private parts and it's like, oh, you're all good down there, chap. And he's like, what? And it's just like one of those moments where you're like, God, people really just didn't understand back then. And then there's this other moment where he basically gets psychiatric help from this hypnotist who's actually played by Ben Kingsley, which is quite cool. And Ben Kingsley's got this strange accent as well. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I love that line in the film when Ben Kingsley's like,
I needn't remind you that your sort were once put to death in England. I would advise you to live in some country, France, Italy, where homosexuality is no longer criminal.
Would it ever be like that in England?
England has always been disinclined to accept human nature.
And that's so great because it's like Ben Kingsley's character, even though it's his job, to hypnotize people out of this thing, he's like, for God's sake, mate, even I know this is just human nature. You're just a bloody human. Go and be a human elsewhere.
But it does, again, I guess, just show what people thought back then. And he talks about how England will never accept homosexuality. And I think it's an interesting side point, actually, to the how the film was received in the UK compared to some other countries. Because I think Hugh and Maurice, James Wilby, said that the release of the film wasn't actually very successful in the UK compared to other countries because they felt that a lot of the film critics were also in the closet and didn't want to, be seen to give good reviews to an openly gay film in the height of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. So it's almost kind of ironic that there was a scene where it was saying that, England, the UK is a backward country that would never accept these things. And then, 70 years later, when the film is actually released, they still can't. So I thought that was quite interesting.
And James alluded to a piece of Thatcher's legislature, which also apparently had homophobic undertones, which I think, again, also may have added to this sense. So that's why they were surprised that maybe the film didn't do so well, where it was bloody made and where it was from, and whereas it did do well in America, did do well in Italy. I also looked up a few more of these things. So in back in the day, they used to use hypnosis and regular brothel visits to try and cure people of this. They gave LSD to lesbians to try and cure them of their homosexuality, or their gayness, I suppose. And there's a bit in the film as well where they suggest that Morris should walk around the grounds with a gun for a bit. Because that will be a very heterosexual thing to do. It's just stuff. But like that's what I love that bit because I was like, that sounds fucking ridiculous, and so does all of those things. It sounds ridiculous, but that is what it is, and it's we're still talking 1910s. This is still primitive ways of curing people, and obviously curing a disease is one thing, but curing something that isn't a disease is a completely other thing as well.
It's got some comparisons with what certain presidents of this time are telling us to take to cure coronavirus. It's all false.
Somebody after some transition music. Right. Yeah. That'll do. Good.
Morris is staying at Hugh's house, and he's having a really torrid time in bed. He's had this hypnosis therapy, and it's kind of he's having a horrible time mentally anyway. So he can't quite sleep. He's thinking about the hypnosis and stuff, and he opens his window to get some air. And there's been a young groundsman, played by Rupert Graves, aka Lestrade, in the most recent BBC adaptation of Sherlock.
It's great.
It's great. Who has been eyeing him up, I have to say, and asking a lot of, it's taken a bit of a shine to Morris. I think this second time of watching it, I've realised that actually that Scudders does take a bit of a shine to him, and Scudders climbs up the ladder and climbs into his room. It's the dead of night, bear in mind, and comes and sits on the bed with Morris and goes, "Mate, I know what's going on." They start kissing, and they have a night of passion, and they wake up the next day naked in bed together. And this is the beginning of his love affair with Scudders. What do you think about Scudders' character, where the film goes at this point?
I really like Scudders as a character. I think he's played really well. I listened to an interview with Rupert Graves, who I really like as an actor in general.
Yeah,
and
same.
It's quite funny. He talked about how, all the actors in this film, Hugh Grant, James Wilby, Rupert Graves, talk about the impact this film has had on many gay people, etc., who've come up and said to them, this film changed my life. This is my favorite film of all time. I've completely had a different outlook on life after watching this film. He said that also the second group of people who liked this film were Japanese girls who liked watching three good-looking young guys, getting their clothes off in the film, which I thought was quite amusing. But
I love it.
Yes, Scudder's character, he's got this nice accent, sort of West Country. Rupert Graves himself is from Weston-super-Mare, I believe, so he was able to take some inspiration from the west of England for his accent. But it's quite it's nice because it's a happy story, whereas I think that's the sort of what the whole story is meant to be about, is that you have the first half of the film where Hugh Grant and Maurice, relationship can't work because of the societal pressures, etc. But then this second relationship that he's in, despite the barriers and the class difference, etc., they are able to find a way of making it work in some ways, which I quite like the story.
Yeah, the film at this end with Scudders and Morris, they have this. Lots goes on. Watch the film for more details, but there's ideas of blackmail and second guessing each other and stuff. It's because they're so paranoid. This time where they, what they're doing is illegal, who they are as people is illegal, and they're really, really worried. And you think, it's not going to end happily. The worst is going to happen, as it always does for gay people in this time. But they both end up in the boathouse together, having this very passionate kiss, and it's a nice ending. And I think it was James Ivory that was saying, I think this ending, for especially a lot of the films about gay people that have been made before and during that time, there never was a happy ending. And even though all the odds are against Morris and Scudders, it was important for them to be like, well, we're going to have a film here where it is a happy ending.
This film is an interesting one in a sense, because it's almost like it's had a renaissance over the last 30 years. When it was underappreciated, underseen when it first came out, but now it's become a bit of sort of history in a way, because and up until this point, I'm sure that most gay men on screen or gay scenes, etc., were stereotypes or poked fun of, etc. And this one, we've actually see a sort of happy ending where these two guys are happily in love, and you're like, great.
Exactly. And I think it just shows that regardless of whether it was like the first to do it or whether it pioneered in any of those things, I think people just really resonate with how the story was told.
Yeah, just to hammer that point home, I did mention it earlier, director James Ivory said, so many people have come up to me since Morris and pulled me aside and said, I just want to know that you changed my life.
That's exactly, it's beautiful. And I'll just add this, that Rupert Graves read about Edwardian agriculture and said it had no effect on his role and it was completely pointless. So there you go.
I love how we watch the same interviews.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
Oscar, I'm going to ask that question that we ask every episode. Is this film, Morris, taking Hugh for granted?
Diggory, I'm slightly not sure what to say here, because as the actual film goes, I felt that in places it was slow and a little boring. If I take myself out of the taking Hugh for granted chair, I don't know how much I actually enjoyed the film, but I do think it's important to acknowledge the significance of the movie. And I also think as one of Hugh's first early pieces, it really stands out. And I actually think he did a really good job.
Yeah.
So I am going to say that we are not taking Hugh for granted. Just about. I didn't absolutely love the film. I don't think it's an absolute classic Hugh film. But I like Hugh's performance, and he looks great, and it's a nice story.
There you go. I mean, I just echo that sentiment wholeheartedly. I don't think we're taking Hugh for granted. Hugh Grant fans out there, he looks great. It's his big break. It's one of his films pre Four Weddings and a Funeral. This is cream of the crop in many ways. He acted it brilliantly. I think he won Best Actor at the Venice Film Festival along with James Wilby. And like you say, it resonates to this day, and it has a cult following. That it shouldn't be something that should be overlooked. So I think for that reason, this film is not taking Hugh for granted. But it does lag in the middle. Bloody hell, it lags. It's boring as fuck. Definitely take 20 minutes off it. Definitely take 20 minutes off it and make it 2 hours.
Come on, directors. 2 hours, 20 minutes. Like, come on. I don't have that time anymore. You know, I'm just doing nothing all day. Like, my schedule's so packed. Please.
Exactly. Well, that's another episode in the bag, in the can. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you have time to watch Maurice. God, I'm never going to
Diggory,
get
it right, man.
Thank you so much for listening again. Keep following us on all the different social medias, at Taking Hugh for Granted on Instagram and Facebook, at Taking Hugh on Twitter, and takinghughforgranted@gmail.com if you want to get in touch. Anything you'd like to say, Oscar?
Not really. Just go watch it. Go and watch another piece of history.
Another piece of history. That's what these films are. History. Hugh Grant films are history. We love you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.
Bye. For copyright reasons, the producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. We simply review Mr. Grant's films and hope to shine light upon some of the lesser-known classics from his illustrious career. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.